You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying.
Hello, everyone. We're back again, and we are back with a real interesting movie this time. It's 13 Women, and it's basically said to be like the precursor to the slasher. It's also supposed to be one of the first like ensemble women cast movies. And it's based on a story also called, or a book also called 13 Women by Tiffany Thayer, who, as Rebecca found out for us, Tiffany's actually a guy. And from the excerpts I've read of the book, that makes sense.
Yes, from what you shared with me, he wasn't far off from she breasted breastfully down the hallway. Yeah, men writing for women.
So, and yet still there's some things in this movie that are very women empowered, and a lot like the general storyline is not. But there are some nice independent women in the film, and that's really nice. But,
and that was good to see.
So this choice happened because we were struggling to find a movie because we didn't want to keep just throwing out all the Universal monster ones. We wanted to space them out because they're our favorites. And we were trying to find a spring horror movie that's, within our time range. And I just stumbled across an internet list of like all horror movies listed by year that they were released. And I stumbled on this one. I was like, okay, 13 Women. What about this one? And of course, Rebecca and Betsy were like, sure. And then I looked up, and it was kind of interesting because, again, one of the first things I found is it's supposed to be like the first slasher film, and it's the only on-screen appearance of Peg Entwistle. And the trivia about Peg Entwistle is she is the woman that jumped off the H in the Hollywood sign. It was Hollywoodland.
Mm-hmm.
And
supposedly her ghost has been seen.
Yeah.
Hollywood lore.
The area. Yeah. And she's actually buried in, I think, was it Springdale Cemetery down by Cincinnati?
Glendale. Part of the Cincinnati area. I was going to go and get pictures. I haven't had a chance just because I was curious. I would like to visit it at some point.
So we're Ohio people, for those of you who don't know. And so that was an interesting bit. And I thought it was really weird that she ended up there. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. It's Oak Hill Cemetery in Springdale, Ohio.
Okay. All right.
Sorry. I'm like, about this.
Eventually we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Stop eating the phone cord.
But yeah, so it turned out when she came over, her and her father came over from England, her father eventually ended up in Ohio, and he died there, and that's where he got buried. So that's why they buried her there. And I believe neither of them had a headstone. She's actually buried next to her father until I think it's 2010. So
it wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, I guess there was a campaign that went on, an internet one, to get her a headstone. So
yeah, she had a very stressful life. She had a lot of like unfortunate things happen, and occasional poor choices, which I think added to her bad luck.
Yeah. So that was an interesting bit of trivia we found out afterwards. And actually, it's kind of sad. I think it was like only maybe a month before the US released the movie she jumped. I think she jumped in September and the movie released in October.
It was something like that. I know that it was a posthumous release for her.
Yeah. She committed suicide on the 18th. And the American date of release was actually that Friday before that. So she was just after.
So yeah. So a bit of a tragedy. She had originally, I think, 14 minutes of the film time, and they cut it down to, I think, like
less than a minute.
4 or 6 minutes, really short.
Yeah.
And
all of her stuff got butchered.
Yeah, and there's very little of her left in it.
Stabbing, screaming. That's it.
Well, there's that little bit when she talks to the Rackhub sisters.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. When she's at the circus.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's funny because I think she looked like she probably was a really good actress.
I mean, she had
much there.
Yeah, she had previous luck on stage roles before.
Mm-hmm.
She'd done a lot of theater, and she wanted. And unfortunately, the problem with depression, plays were shuttering left and right. So she wanted to try to make it a go at Hollywood, which, if you're already mentally stressed, is a bad place.
Trying to break in,
Yeah.
And I expect that probably it's possible that since her role got cut so bad, it might also probably contributed to her leap off the H. But
that and
a lot of it,
she burned herself with Broadway as well, because she had had sort of a spoken agreement to perform in a Broadway play, and she basically blew them off to do some Hollywood or to try for the Hollywood stuff. Her contract got canceled with RKO, and then Broadway didn't want to touch her because they're like, well, you fucked us over. So
yeah, most of her scenes got cut because in the movie, well, and even in the book, but not to the same, I guess, extent, she had a lesbian lover, and that didn't test well with the audience. And even though this was pre-code, they just did not feel that would go very well. And another interesting trivia about that is Zita Johann was up for being in this movie as well.
Ooh.
Zita, from The Mummy, but she refused because of the illicit sex and the violence in it. And actually, I shouldn't say she refused. She requested to be released from her RKO contract because she did not want to do this movie because of the illicit sex and the violence in it. And they did release her from her contract. So
I remember reading that when we did The Mummy. I was like, isn't this the movie that Zita Johann said no to?
It is.
Right.
Hey, wait. I've heard of this before. Yeah, I was just, as soon as you had suggested it, I was interested because I was like, well, this is sort of the precursor to the sorority slasher.
Mhm.
Very
So
much
we
so.
all
Very
know
much
we have to watch it at this point.
Yeah.
And I certainly feel it had great potential.
It did. That's what we kept saying
So
all around.
much
It could have been a
potential.
great movie. Sorry, go ahead, Betsy.
No,
Yeah.
I was just saying so much potential, but
Well, we were discussing runtime of it previously, and it's for anybody who's interested in watching it, sit down, go ahead and watch it, because it's only going to take an hour.
Yeah,
Because
it is
the
59
runtime
59 minutes,
Yeah.
cut down from 74.
Yes.
Yeah. So
The original.
which makes me wonder how well the original was anyway, because that's not too much to add from it.
That's true.
And, we were also
an
discussing
extra 14 minutes.
I mean, it probably would have been better, but it still would have only been 14 minutes. And as noted, the movie and the book are called 13 Women. And I think that's supposed to include the antagonist, but I'm not entirely sure because cast-wise, there was only 11 main women in the movie, and then 3 of those women were completely cut out of the movie. So there's only actually 8 main character women in the movie, which are the women behind me here that stayed in it. And so already there's a lot cut out, and already you're like, when you watch it, you get a little frustrated because you like only hear about 8 of these women and you only find out the fate of 5 if you include the antagonist, but 4 if you don't.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah, it's very, maybe those additional 15 minutes could have smoothed out the movie because it's very choppy.
Very choppy.
It's cut to hell, folks. It is cut to hell.
Yeah.
And also a warning, if you're expecting like slasher, like blood and knives, and no, it's actually a very cerebral horror thriller in a sense. And not very scary.
Well, no, it's
but
for our
it definitely, yeah, but there's no way you can miss the element. Like there's no way you can miss the whole revenge plot and everything like that. Also another thing, there's shall we say outdated language. It's not as bad as a lot of older movies, but there's enough in here that
it's not
appropriate.
Yeah, the premise is of the movie is that there were these group of women that had all gone to a finishing school.
Yeah.
And they had sent in letters, to a noted astrologist, and they're getting back these fortunes of doom. And the antagonist is actually a woman who tried to go to the finishing school with them, and basically to put it kindly, she was iced out at minimum, psychologically tortured out at best, because she was
Half
of
Indian.
mixed race. Yeah, she was half
mixed
Indian.
race. Yeah,
And in the movie, the language like that Jenny alluded to, you hear, I didn't even catch it the first time because I was only kind of like half paying attention. And the second time when I watched it, when the defective, maybe that's a Freudian slip, the detective refers to her as a half-breed. And I'm like, whoa,
And a
holy
half
shit,
Hindu
they just
and
said
a half
that.
caste and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
half Hindu.
half
Well,
Hindu.
Or the
Well, I
or
was like,
the
oh, we are taking.
or the schoolmistress referring to her as mysterious or exotic,
Yep.
which is another code, for
They also said
not
something
white.
about Eastern mysticism.
Yeah.
Well, and then the astrologer's name also very awful. So
Swami, whatever.
Yogadochi or Yogadachi.
Yeah,
So,
Swami Yogadachi.
yeah. So just be aware. It's a bit like I said, as far as it goes, it's actually pretty tame for what you can expect from the 30s. Still not good. I still maintain they should remake this, remove the racist language and such, and do it right, because it could be a really great slasher movie for sure.
There's a
it would be so good.
interesting element here of like being the other and being othered. We were talking about like modern movies that kind of take from this, like My Bloody Valentine. If anyone has seen My Bloody Valentine.
Yes, I have. I like that one.
David Boreanaz, where he was like kind of a dorky guy, and then he starts picking off all the girls who would refuse him when he was like kind of a dorky guy. This is like a precursor to that, like in a lot of ways.
Prom night, Carrie, in a sense,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Receiving the letter in the mail, and there's so many different ones, but I'm like, honestly, a pretty concept is so strong that you can see where other people took the concept, ran with it, and did better with it. This one is not the strongest, but it's entertaining. Boy,
and the elements are just there. The elements are there. They just didn't do it right.
And I think they were maybe they were trying to play it light for censors issue.
I'm sure.
Probably, but they could have at least let it be a twist, because from the first time that she's on screen who our villain is.
You can tell by her eye makeup.
Well, I think the eye makeup was meant to try to make her look Indian, but
that's why I'm saying you can tell by her eye makeup, because she's the only, she's the only one who has that very vampy look.
Which actually, let's take a moment to talk about that. Myrna Loy is who plays Ursula Georgi, who is the villainess in this, and she's absolutely stunning and stuff. And her like eyes, despite the yellow face that her eye makeup was supposed to be, it really brings her eyes out in a very stunning manner, and she uses it very well. And Myrna Loy's acting history prior to like basically the Thin Man movies, she was always playing these characters. They basically typecast her to play the roles of people that were not white, basically.
I did see that when I was reading about her.
Yeah, and she actually didn't like that. She hated any form of prejudice, and she looks back on that. She had looked back on that part of her career, and it was not with pride. She was very unhappy that that's what happened. But girl had to get some money, so she made some money, took the roles, and then as soon as she got away from them, she never went back. So there's that.
I mean, I get it, but also,
yeah.
And it was of the time. It was very much of the time. Like,
you never had a minority playing a minority role.
If she had said no, it wouldn't be like they would have put an actual, Indian woman in there. It would have just been another white woman who they did eye makeup on and said, look, she's half Indian. So yeah, that would also be my recommendation for a remake, is to actually put the correct person.
Right.
Yeah, I would like to actually see this one redone.
Me too.
I think it could be
Absolutely.
wonderful if they could do it and actually have 13 women in it, maybe.
I would also
It
like it to
definitely
be
has to
kept
be
in the
longer.
same in the 30s, because I think it'd be great to redo it, but in the 30s with actual 13 women with correct casting and the removal of the racist language.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind seeing a little blood in it.
A little bit. I like it. I do like the psychological thriller aspect.
But there were parts of it that I was like, this is just silly. Like the
Yes.
falling from the trapeze where she
done.
falls and then there's an explosion gif basically.
It's like a PowerPoint star that happens. But actually, this is so bad. The first time I watched the movie and that death happened, I laughed. Like I giggled. It was so funny. To set the stage. So of course, 12 of these women got the suggestion somehow to write this specific astrologer to get their horoscopes done in a sort of like round robin kind of way. And the first death scene you get one of the Rakov sisters who are twins that went to this St. Albans finishing school.
May and June, by the by. Oi.
Yes, May and June. And the prediction they got was that one of them would cause the death of the other, and the other would like live their life in insane asylum or in prison for it. And so you see this scene where they're up on the trapeze, and the one who's read the letter knows is getting super nervous, and she's still does it anyway. And when they go to do the aerial stunt, it's not like she grabs her sister's hands and they slip. She literally pulls her hands away, and her sister doesn't even quite reach for her hands, and their sister just goes boom and dies.
It looks like to me, even if they had tried to reach, they wouldn't have made it.
Maybe, but she didn't try to reach. Like she literally had her hands out. You could see her pull her hands back away from her sister. But the whole point and the premise was supposed to be that the suggestion was put in their mind, and it was the suggestion that had the power over them, and because they kept thinking of it. There's even the intro, it has a nice little blurb like from a psychological book that says that suggestion is so powerful that it can cause certain types of crimes to happen and stuff. So you already have this set as to what's happening here.
Right.
It's not
why this
is
the power of
suggestion.
mesmerism. Yeah.
The power of
then
suggestion.
You're also introduced to Peg Entwistle's character this time, Hazel. And do you guys think it was funny too? Like, I always thought when people said you old so and so, they were being funny, like because they would say like, instead like you old son of a bitch, There's actually a scene where Peg Entwistle's character comes in, and like I think it's May sees her and goes, Hazel, you old so and so, and I just started cracking up. I'm like, gosh. Now I feel like I'm just gonna have to greet people that way.
The old so-and-so.
But so as I had said that like Peg, a lot of her stuff got cut because of the same-sex love affair that was in the book / in the movie. And I think if you notice the character when she comes out towards the stands and she meets up with her friend, her travel companion, the way they kind of put their arms together and stuff, it looks very coupley to me. And so I wasn't shocked when I read that was what that was supposed to be, and that's why it got cut. But
I mean, it makes sense, but they literally cut her down to that little bit with the sisters, and then literally just a paper coming up saying what happens. And
Wife
then
murders husband. I must have lost my mind.
And then there's that little knife scene. You just see a knife go into husband chest gone. So there's also your slasher element there.
I was going to say that is the only slasher element, I think, really. The real slasher element is
it's a nice classic one, though.
It is. It's a very Chicago attractive woman kills husband, like because she's very pretty, and then she screams like gorgeously at the camera.
Yes.
I had sent a little blurb to the group about what was actually supposed to be Hazel Cousin's thing, and to sum it up briefly, like from the actual book, it was supposed to be that this character was so beautiful that men either assumed she already was married or were too intimidated to hit on her. And this is one of the hints why we knew this had to be written by a man. And as a result, she was a virgin and she had tuberculosis, and she became a lesbian because men would not hit on her, obviously, because, if she could have a man.
Wow. Yep.
But yeah, so she was kind of like the way the story runs, it sounds like she was forced into lesbianism because no man would hit on. because that's how that works. But she ends up in an affair with the doctor's wife that was treating her for tuberculosis, and then ends up in a sane asylum, I believe it was, from the result of the doctor's wife breaking up with her. That's the book version of it, as opposed to the movie version. And I'm like, wow, that's yeah.
What's a bit much?
The dude totally wrote that.
Oh yeah.
Also, interestingly, the Rakov sisters were in a circus in the book, but they were not, as this little article wrote, attractive trapeze artists. They were in the sideshow as the fat women.
Oh my. Wow. I understand why they changed it for the movie.
I mean, I'm torn on either way. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a fat woman in the sideshow. I think they changed it for the movie because you can't have ugly women in the movie. But they consider ugly, in the 30s.
They would have never cast anybody plus size in it.
Yeah. So not going to happen.
Anything more than like a maid or support person, Yeah.
So there's that. Because I mean, you can't be fat and pretty, nor could you be fat and people have empathy for you.
No.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And in case you don't know, that's sarcasm. And I myself am a fat woman. So there you go. But so there's a lot of interesting things that both the book and the movie, you're like, questionable kind of things. I haven't read the full book, just to be clear. It's actually very hard to find a copy of the book without paying $100 to $200. Even tried the library. No copies that I found there.
Probably we would have to do interlibrary loan. Times when I've been trying to find books, I've had to do interlibrary loan because our library just did not have it, period.
So
when you're doing that, it's a weird, you actually have to have all the information yourself. It isn't like one of those, oh, you have it here, you can request it from here. Nope. They make it hard. You got to supply all the information. And then they're like, okay, sure, we'll get it for you.
They can do that for connected libraries, but like if you need it from like far away, you have to do it a different way.
I got something from Ball State once.
Got it. Yeah, nothing was really coming up on internet searches like Zoom sites. Like,
it's definitely it's probably one of those. It's been out of print for years, and it's not exactly page turner, I'm sure.
Tiffany Thayer was a very prolific writer, though. He has several books out there, and he also, I guess, was an actor, but I didn't really look up his filmography. But he's actually got a book also called 13 Men. I didn't really read if it's the same premise or not, though. Which
I'm afraid now.
I guess that's his attempt at equality. I'm 13 men and 13 women. But sorry, so Ursula Georgi, played by Myrna Loy, is as we pointed out, our villain, and we find this out very, very quickly. Like, basically, I think after they do the quick blurb about Hazel's death. No, maybe it was right before that. But either way, it's really quick within the movie that they introduce her character. They introduce that she's actually working with the astrologer. They, show how she's taking the poor astrologer, by the way, is heartbroken over what's going on with these women because he had written them and was like, his version of what he found in their charts was that they were supposed to have happy lives. And then, like, when he found out that the Rakab sisters had this tragedy, he was devastated and then he was afraid to send out any more horoscopes because all of them were reading rather pleasant. And what was happening, of course, was Ursula was taking away the good ones, replacing them with the bad ones to put the suggestions in these women's minds to do it. And I actually was rooting for Ursula for several reasons. Like, one, I don't like mean girls, and I think they should get their comeuppance. So I'm okay with that. Where I didn't like is how she wasn't necessarily, like, when she was going directly for the women, I was fine with it. She went after one's kid, and I'm like, which also was a downfall.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, I get that to get to the woman, you can get to her by killing the kid, and that would wreck her life. But you could also just kill the kid or kill the woman,
I didn't completely understand like why she was completely focused on killing the child until like
because it was,
I wanted to ruin her life, but
the inference I got was because the character was very, and they say as much, is she's still strong, and the chauffeur is like, oh yes, very, is that she has a very strength of character. She's been through a lot because I assume she's a widow.
Yeah, that was my take on
Yeah,
it.
that's my assumption. So she's been through that. And in her presentation, she is just like utterly living to be a mom. Like she does not seem to have any other function or interest.
Yeah.
And so to damage that, you have to hit at what she is living for. You know, what does she treasure the most? Then that is what I have to go after.
Here's
But
another
that's why she's
question,
gone after the
because it doesn't seem like any of them were very close to Ursula Georgi. So how the hell would she know this? I mean, I understand that the chauffeur is working for them now,
Yeah.
but he hasn't worked for her for that long.
No, he was.
So how does
working for
Ursula
the
know?
doctor.
It's one of
So
those
my-
things that you have to just go on movie license and go, somehow she knows.
My thought on that was with, how there's a small scene after, I think, the poison attempt for the candy, where the detective actually goes up to St. Albans and talks to their teacher and, or their headmistress, I think is what she was. And she talks about having run into Ursula Georgi. But it's funny because it's like, it takes her a while to remember that. And my thought is probably what happened is that they are keeping in touch with the headmistress to some degree, because also the headmistress had met with Hazel, which was Peg Entwistle's character. So my thought was she's probably getting her information that way, secondhand, and
makes
went
sense.
after it that way. But
Yeah,
I mean, that's just how my brain made sense of something that wasn't really filled in. Because it's not like you could look them up on Facebook. I mean, like now if they remade it, it could be real simple for her to research these people. But 1932, a little bit harder to keep in touch with stuff. Though these were society women, so there would probably be stuff in the newspapers and stuff like that. So she probably could have got some through that. But yeah.
These were all very upper class. Except for the trapeze artists. I couldn't figure that one out,
to go to the finishing school, but I thought that was weird myself, Rebecca, that, I'm like, you don't really think ending up in the circus from finishing school?
Because you have this, Hazel's character, a rich society wife, Mrs. Stanhope, the widow, the rich widow, the other, the woman who offs herself.
Helen, I think I forgot her full name, but the character name was Helen.
It's very clear she is moneyed as well.
Able to do,
all of them, and the one single woman who I adore.
Jo
She's
Turner,
like,
I think was her name.
when she's talking about her fiance, she's like, oh, what does he want? He just wants to be rich, racehorse, and something else.
Anything but kids,
anything but children. And just my instant thought was, well, that sounds fine.
That's perfect.
That sounds great.
Which is actually one of those interesting scenes, because you have Irene Dunn's character Stanhope. Was it Laura Stanhope? Yeah. And where she says that she doesn't want to remarry, that she likes standing on her own 2 feet and being independent, which I thought was awesome. But then it's followed with Joe going, can any woman really be?
Yes.
Clearly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny as hell. But so the death, just like, so we've talked about May and June. We mentioned Hazel, how she stabbed her husband and ended up in prison. We glossed on Helen, who's the woman who shot herself, which is interesting because Helen was the only one that, of the tragedies that unfolded from the astrological readings, that actually had direct contact with Ursula, and it happened on the train. And which it kind of made you sad, because like you could see, like, if Ursula had like worked more, well, it's not that she needed to work more, but Helen was very nice to Ursula when she ran into her on the train. Like Helen was like, oh, I think we treated you terribly. I'm surprised you were kind enough to even ask after these other women, is basically how the conversation went. And of course, Ursula's playing a role at this point. And so she's saying, oh, those things were in the past kind of thing. It seems silly now. But the whole reason she's going after these women is because they harassed her out of this finishing school. And the finishing school for her was her hope to become white and pass as white, and therefore have all the protections and the privilege of a white woman, where she had none of that and had been abused. And she had been like basically a missionary child that had been brought over and was probably subject to they never say exactly all that happened to her, but they imply that basically she was probably trafficked as a child for sure. And then basically her fate afterwards was basically using her body to get wherever she was going to get. And
the finishing school was her ticket out, and they took it away.
Yeah.
So as a consequence, she was going to take away what they valued: freedom, lives, what have you.
So, I mean, there's even a scene later when she's with Laura Stanhope and she mentions, she starts talking about, white sailors when I was 12 years old, and like Laura Stanhope cuts her off.
I noticed that one right away. I'm like, oh, I think I know where they were. Yeah. I think I know where they were going to go with that.
So which goes back to, like I said, I was fully rooting for Ursula aside from the whole child thing. But so those are the actual revenges that took place. So you have those 4. And then like you only meet, said 3 other women from there. There's Laura, who like she goes after her son Bobby. There's Joe, who her fate was supposed to be that she's supposed to suicide over love lost, basically.
To which Grace, she said,
go ahead.
To which she said, I don't kill myself over men. Men kill themselves over me.
I did, girl. And then there was Grace, who you had no idea was supposed to happen to Grace, but you actually, well, at least I did. I wanted something to happen to Grace.
She was annoying as piss.
She was self-righteous as one. She was like, oh, you don't know the fates, the stars. You're just materialistic. Like, rich girl, like, you're not?
Yeah.
And she was kind of contributing to the suggestion, because they talk about how she's sending letters saying, oh, you better listen, you better follow, you're going to die, just like the astrologer said. And Laura tells her, she's like, you're making this worse by doing this.
Yeah. And like, actually, no. Laura actually was like, okay, I think you should leave. She actually boots her out of the house, because she's like, I've had enough of this.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Betsy.
No, I just said it makes sense. Kick her out. Like, you don't need that around.
Yeah. I seriously wanted something to happen to her. I'll probably look it up later to find out if like Grace got hers. But another interesting thing.
She's one of those people you're happy if they get hit by a bus.
Well, I mean, in your slasher films, the genre, or even in your horror ones, specifically your slasher ones, there's that one character that gets other people killed because they do stupid shit and people keep trying to save them. That's probably based off this Grace character.
I was thinking she reminded me a bit of Nora in House on Haunted Hill, where you're just like, oh my God, was the ghost just kill this woman? Yes.
Shut her up, please. But so another way that they tried, that Ursula actually pushed the suggestion further, is she hypnotized or mesmerized this astrologer into killing himself. And she sent out letters on his behalf saying that I tried to help you. I want to help you. I can't help you. I myself am subject to the fate of the stars, and I will die before this date myself. And it's interesting because I don't know if y'all caught this, but it took me a couple watches to catch this myself. So the astrologer tells Ursula what her fate's going to be, which they're lovers. They're totally and he's completely enraptured by her. And, he's like, we must have met before. And she says something about how, well, it could be another life. Why don't you do my chart and find out? He's like, I did, but it's horrible. You're going to die this terrible death from an accident falling from the train. Your body's going to be mangled on the tracks. And she looks at him and starts they focus on her eyes to make it look creepy. And she's mesmerizing him. She's like, you are going to die that same way. And I didn't catch that she basically was like, okay, that's how you're going to die. Or if it was supposed to be that was her plan all along for him, like to die jumping in front of a train, or she hadn't figured out exactly how she was going to have him commit suicide and figured, well, if that's supposed to be my fate, then it's yours.
I'm sort of taking it as the fact that she knew she was going to have to tie up her loose ends somehow.
No, I mean, all along I knew she meant to kill him or have him kill himself. I just don't know if she chose the train death fate because that was what was in her chart and he told her about it, or if that was always her simple answer to it was. So yeah, she mesmerizes him into jumping in front of a train or a subway in New York, and then sends off some poison candy to Laura Stanhope's little son, Bobby. who was a very prolific child actor. He was in the R Gang movies and several others. So, which I found him a little annoying and not very endearing. But what I really loved was his closet door. That had the little doggy sitting. I'm like, I want a closet door like that. It was like cut out like a little dog house, and there's a little stuffed animal dog that was sitting there, like it was sticking its head out of a dog house, and I thought that was adorable. But what I thought was dumb as all hell is that, so the whole thing is like Bobby's birthday is coming up, and that's why there's like chocolates and presents being sent to him. But his mom, Laura, is storing the kid's birthday presents in his own closet.
The kid's room. Yeah. I'm like, no young child is going to have the self-control to leave those things alone. What are you doing?
Yeah. I'm like, that's just cruel, really. Like, here, don't touch things.
Yeah.
Just lock them up in your own room, woman. What's wrong with you? Especially when you're already afraid for his life. Like, you have enough fear that you're like, think that something's going wrong with his presents. You've already caught the poison candy, and you're going to stick the potentially lethal presents in his room with him. Because why?
He's not smart
At all.
He's strong, but she's not smart.
Not smart.
Yeah. So all this comes to a head. To wrap this up, like I said, they just stop focusing on the other women. You don't know what happens to Joe. You don't know what happens to Grace. There's other women that never show up in the movie because they got cut.
The mysterious 13 women who we never find out about.
There was only 11 in the cast. Like when you read through the cast, there's only 11 women that they put in there, and only 8 of them made it into the actual movie. And only 4 of them fates you understood. Well, 5 technically, because you know in the end, well, 6. You know what happens to Ursula. You know what happens to Laura after. Well, you don't know what happens after, but you know that she survives the threat of Ursula prior to. But you don't know if Joe succumbed and killed herself over a man. You don't know what the fuck happened to Grace, and you know these other women that never even appear, and you have no idea what happened to them. But the cop shows up because of Helen's suicide. So they're waiting for Helen to show up because Laura has this idea, let's gather the women that are left. We'll meet at my house. We'll, stop this suggestion thing from happening, clear the air, and stop, dwelling on it, and maybe nip this in the bud.
This is the beginning of a good slasher film.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we could have it. They're all in the house, and then,
Mm-hmm.
But what you get instead is just Joe, and Helen doesn't show up, and then the cop shows up and says, Helen's stuff was supposed to come here, but she killed herself, and do you know why?
And she had a tragic backstory. So then they're like, well, her daughter just died suddenly. So she may have just committed suicide because she was really, really sad. And they're like, that makes sense.
Which let me actually slightly counter that. This was definitely, I think, one of the earlier times where we see the introduction of forensics and investigation actually being effective in a movie, because you have, when there are the scene in the train car, the coroner's like, well, with the restricted space and angles, it was clear that it could have only been her that fired the shots. And so they do actually take the physics of it into account. Yeah. So they actually did look, and they're like, oh well, okay, it clearly was her that did the shot. So they're not. Yeah.
Well, no, I wasn't implying that she didn't commit suicide. She definitely did.
Oh yeah.
They're like, no, there's a totally logical reason why this woman might have committed suicide that has literally nothing to do with her getting a horoscope in the mail.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, after that, they start thinking more about maybe we should say something about this, And
the detective also notices the missing pin, because he sees on Helen's blouse there's a small little area where something was obviously removed.
Yeah.
And
but he doesn't think much more, because at that time there's nothing else to give him. There's a suicide, there's a pin missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's no other connection because these women haven't told him about the round robin, astrology readings, the horoscopes.
Yeah, he doesn't have enough information to go on yet.
Anything. So he does actually, he had ran into Ursula Georgi after the shooting, or after they examined the suicide, but she gave a false name, and he has no idea that she's connected to it at this time.
Well, at that time, he doesn't even know what she looks like. So, yeah.
But he does request that Laura Stanhope come down to give a statement the next day about her friend Helen and all that. And that's also the next day is when the poison candy shows up for her son. And since she's already suspicious with all these, the astrologer killing himself, all the things that happened to other women, Helen killing herself, she smartly stops Bobby from eating the candy and decides to take it with her to have it examined by the cops.
That's what I think really gets the ball rolling on the actual investigation bit is.
Well, that, and she tells him about all the other women and so the whole background is now filled in where now there's a chain of events. There's something more going on.
Yeah.
Plus, here's some actual physical evidence as opposed to just suggestions, because if you just had the letters alone,
they would have been like oh, hysterical women, hysterical
but here's
women.
Some actual physical poison candy being sent to make this happen. Yes. So yeah, so it does really make it a serious investigation at this point now. And Rebecca, you pointed this out on a couple things that the science in it was really good. They were, did some chemistry.
They did the chemistry testing on the candy, which from the discussion, I'm guessing either cyanide or strychnine. Then there was also where the detective requests the wire photo. And I was like, what is he? And so I looked it up and essentially it was really the initial beginnings of the fax machine.
Yeah, it was like early code for sure.
Yeah, it would like read the light and dark of the picture and translate that into an electrical, send it over the phone line, the receiver, blah, 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 spits it out. Sounds like
it had to go to another computer. So it was like a scanner to another scanner. Yeah, I looked it up too because I'm like, how the hell did they do that in 1930 fucking two?
Yeah,
they did though. That was really cool.
Crazy. Yeah.
But yeah, so he ends up finding out about Ursula Georgi because he notices, and this is one of my favorite parts because I think it's so funny. When Laura Stanhope came in and they're discussing all this stuff about the horoscopes and the poison candy and all these things, he notices her sorority pin. Now these pins, like you would think people would have them pinned up on their lapel, like normally where you would put a pin, but the tradition for this sorority is they pin it below the boob. Like if you had breasts, it'd be like right under your nipple, just below your butt, your bra line. So it's kind of like hanging off if you had like a low nipple.
It was close to your natural waist. And I'm like, that's the weirdest spot for a pin. I agree. Why would you?
When he starts touching it, it looks like he's trying to fondle her. It's so.
And that screen grab you sent, it does. I'm like, oh, is he grabbing her on screen?
I'll add it. You guys will see the picture so you understand what I'm talking about. It's a very bizarre place for a woman to put a pin for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
But he finds the pin. She tells him that's their sorority from St. Albans. He's like, where's that? What is it? And she tells him. So he goes up and visits it. And that's when the Ursula Georgi connection's made because Hazel has said that she got the suggestion from the head mistress from the school to contact this astrologer and get their horoscopes in a round robin sort of way. The head mistress is like, that's insane. I never would have done that. But then suddenly has this weird memory of talking to Ursula Georgi prior to, and she tells the cop about that. And that's when he decides to find out if she has any connection to the astrologer and what her picture is. And that's where the case basically gets busted wide open at this point.
Yep.
So, because he gets the picture, he recognizes her from the train station. She goes back and tells, discusses it with Laura Stanhope. She's like, yeah, that Ursula was somebody I assume she explains how they wronged her. Maybe she doesn't, because she doesn't seem very accountable for their actions as children. Well, and that's her whole thing. We were young. I'm like, they probably weren't children. They were probably like 17 or 18, which is young now. In the 30s was not. Like, that's like a year before you get married.
Yeah, I'm sort of putting it as roughly around that same age, like, end of high school-ish, or perhaps in place of,
right. But like, to me at that point in time, like in the 20s and 30s, end of high school was more like,
you were done.
Yeah.
You were definitely considered an adult, frankly, by that time.
Point.
I mean,
so they should have behaved better. They didn't, And like in the confrontation between Ursula and Laura, like, don't get me wrong. I understand that Laura is very focused on saving her kid and not wrong for that. But, when she just acts like Ursula has no right to be so angry, it's like, that's no reason for committing murder. I mean, in a lot of ways, you killed this girl, by getting her kicked out, you pretty much kind of killed any hope she had for a life where she didn't basically have to prostitute herself in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very clear.
Which, nothing against sex work, but if it's something you choose to do as opposed to something you're forced to do, there's two different,
There's
Exactly.
a distinct difference.
So I don't know. Anything else you guys want to add?
Well, just that so when I'm watching it, there's the end, the high climactic scenes do take place on the train because the detective is like, hey, maybe you should go out of town for a little bit, sort of, remove yourself, go someplace safe. And so she gets on the train, and I think she had mentioned it like when she was getting on the train, she's like, oh, I wish you could come with. And he's like, oh, me too. Although they secretly did. As you see later. And then, she's on the train. There's the confrontation with Ursula. Detective busts in. Ursula runs and just bam, jumps off the train. And I'm like, what? I'm sitting here doing my cross stitch, watching the movie, and all of a sudden it ends. And I'm like, what just happened? And I had to rewind and go back. Like that was it.
It was pretty shocking. It was pretty shocking.
It was like random scenes, the end.
Yeah, it was.
Woman jumps off a train. Yeah, it was in a very abrupt ending.
It was a very abrupt ending. It was.
Yeah. So basically Ursula goes to try to kill Bobby. She mesmerizes Laura into falling asleep. She opens the door, and the cops had jumped back on the train after it looked like they were not going to do it. So she was shocked to find them there. It was like a sting, for lack of a better.
Yeah.
So as soon as she sees them, she just takes off running. They stop to make sure Laura is okay. And it's really not much of a pursuit either. You don't really even see the cops behind her. Like, she seems like she's plenty far ahead of them. So in theory, she probably could have got away somehow. Like, she could have maybe, I don't know. But instead, she just opens the caboose and just walks onto the tracks. So, therefore fulfilling her destiny as read by the horoscope, where she dies in a terrible way. Which I don't think that's an accident, though. It's not an accident if you deliberately jump.
No.
But it was supposed to be an accident where she falls on the train tracks, but she deliberately did it. Which then you have that scene right before she does the.
Yes, the Swami's face
coming from the bright star, and then the floating head. There's a lot of cheese in this movie.
There's your supernatural aspect. The Swami, the wronged Swami coming back from the dead to drive her to death.
Yeah, make the prediction come true. Also, though, I guess we should mention Burns, the chauffeur. So Burns had been the astrologer chauffeur that Ursula had seduced at the time and sent to go work for Laura, which that was like the one thing they did not reveal right away. Like, everything else you knew Ursula was the bad guy. You knew that that the astrologer was a rube that got used, but you didn't
later,
know
you knew that she was using the chauffeur, but you didn't understand.
Well, you didn't know that the chauffeur was part of the plan until almost the end of the movie. Well, they do show him with her, and that was like way later. So at first, because Burns comes across as a really nice guy, and I think he actually was a really nice guy. Like, he clearly liked the kid. He didn't seem to have any issue with Mrs. Stanhope. But then you see a scene in a cabin where you find out that clearly he's in love with Ursula, and Ursula has put him in this position. And then Ursula takes it a step further once her poison candy didn't work, and she puts dynamite in a rubber ball that doesn't quite look like. Oh, yes, please, Betsy.
That wouldn't work.
No.
I'm just saying.
Well, no.
Dynamite doesn't, it's not.
Well, I know.
Motion soluble. Yeah. But my husband was like, so she stole dynamite and then took the nitroglycerin out of it. So because that's the only way it would like that.
That was like one of those things that I don't think somebody at that time would have been questioning. Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
And I know you see TNT and you think, oh, it explodes, and it's like, no, it would only explode if you like lit it on fire. But okay.
There's some unstableness that could happen with glycerin and gunpowder, but you have to make that happen. You can't just buy dynamite and expect that it's going to bounce on them. Yeah.
Right. Put dynamite in a ball, and the ball bouncing is going to set off your dynamite. That is probably not going to happen. Like you.
Nope. Well, that's one of those. That's one of those movie devices, like, if a car goes over a cliff, it explodes. Really?
Or,
Does it?
if there's
Does it
fire anywhere
really?
near a car, it explodes.
Yep.
It's,
Yep.
but yeah, so, and you can tell Burns is not into killing the kid. He protests at the time and stuff like that. And eventually it's found out right at the moment, basically, where Mrs. Stanhope is trying to get the car loaded up with all the kids' toys to have them tested, because she's smart enough to realize that if they tried it once, they could try it again.
Yep.
And she's having Burns, the chauffeur who gave the explosive toy, who's, take her to the station to have them tested. So it's funny. I think that was a wonderful acting job on his part. He is sweating balls, man. He's like, I'm driving myself to my own prison sentence here.
He's like, well, shit.
He tries hard, man. First he tries with the sick mother, and and to be fair, like, Laura comes up with a perfect solution that's really kind in the sense. She's like, drop me off, take the car, go take care of your mom. I'll get another ride home. And he still looks hesitant, which is really where, if I were her, I'd be suspicious as fuck, because that's a little weird. I mean, especially you think of the day.
Yeah, well, especially because all this weird shit is going on. Oh, why is this chauffeur who's only been working for me for a few months? Why is he suddenly acting like this? Wouldn't that also trigger concern?
Yeah. Well, especially you think about it, it's not like today where you have sick time and sick days and you can just be like, look, I'm going, you can't fire me. You know what I mean? Like, she could have told, oh, that's too bad, your mom's sick, drive me. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like,
I mean,
her gesture would have seemed very generous for the day. Let's put it that way.
Extremely generous. I mean, this depression, you were lucky to have a job, let alone a probably decent one, which that one seems to be.
The car's not starting because he hasn't flipped the switch. And helpful little cops like, did you flip your switch? Oh yeah. And then it was like the best chase scene I think I've seen it.
I love it.
The chase scene was
while
amazing.
this is happening, and they take off to go to the police station because Burns gets outplayed by, well, this is the suggestion and the car's working, so drive. The detective gets a call about the fact that yes, Ursula was working for the astrologer, and yes, guess what? Also, Burns had been a chauffeur for them too. And then the detective puts two and two together. It's like, oh shit. Calls to try to, find out if Mrs. Stanhope's safe, and if Burns is still there, finds out that they're driving to the station, jumps in a car. They start heading towards her house. They see him, they flip a U-turn. Burns sees him coming, speeds up like he's gonna outrace them.
Yeah. and she's like, could you slow down, please?
Yeah. Mrs. Stanhope, no clue. She's like, are you driving? Can you? No. Oh, and then he jumps out the car.
Yeah. And full props to her. She's like, oh shit, and starts to go over the back seat to try to get a hold of the steering wheel. Which
I thought was interesting, because truthfully, the car would have slowed down because they were going uphill with no gas being given to it. It would have just kind of. But, that wouldn't be very exciting. So, of course, you have the cop's car pull up and the detective jump over, and somehow he manages to stop the car without opening the door, hitting the brake. I don't know how that worked, but maybe there was a handbrake. I don't know.
Maybe magic. Who knows? Yeah.
Maybe he
I was
grabbed the
guessing
handbrake.
probably handbrake. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, was a handbrake.
Well, meanwhile, he has her throw the packages out the car. She throws two out. The second one happens to be the bomb, which explodes. Because that's how dynamite in a ball works, and which leads us up to the end scene, basically. But
it's fun.
It was a really fun scene. It was giggle worthy.
Honestly, didn't even care about the ball. The whole chase sequence was great.
Wonderful.
I'm like, it was a good sequence. I liked
it.
The
whole chase sequence. So
yeah. So I don't know, like, it wasn't a good movie. And if you're looking for a traditional slasher like we know them, you're not going to find it. But if you want to see what put the framework in for the traditional slasher, you will see it here.
It's the seed of the
formula is here.
Yeah, you can definitely see the start.
And the costuming, oh my God.
This is wonderful.
Everything Ursula wears I want but can't wear because I have boobs. There's a one dress I really love. It's the dress that Joe wears when the dinner party is supposed to happen, when they kick Grace out of the house. It's this wonderfully odd version of patterns with like this very stiff sleeve, and I look at it, I'm like, my whole boob would show. and you see
Be falling
nothing.
out
Like,
the side.
because like the sides are wide open, and you don't even get a glimpse really of side titty from her. I'm like, I am so angry.
I'll
Not
have
really
to
angry. I
take a
was super
look.
jealous. I'm like, that's not fair. I can't wear a dress. Not without some like bra cups put in that would keep you cinched in, because it would be bad.
Lots of tape.
Well,
Lots of
they would. I mean, well, they would have been wearing girdles and corsets and everything. So even then,
Or nothing, because I mean, the 20s and 30s bras were not.
during the 20s, yeah,
They
during
had
the
them, but
20s,
they
it
didn't
was
wear them
more.
often.
More that they were. More that they used binders and because they were going for more of a flat silhouette
For the
for the
flapper,
20s.
sure, yeah. But you could tell there's nothing she's wearing
Yeah.
there.
But
Or if it is, it was very skillfully made, because you don't see any hint of it on that dress, at least not on the sides.
yeah, 30s were more of a natural silhouette compared to the 20s.
Like you wouldn't really wear a bra per se. Not that like we
you
know
did,
them
no,
now.
they still did. I've been doing a lot of looking into fashion stuff, like underlayers and whatnot, because only with like the right underlayers are you gonna get the damn dress to fit the way it needs to. But they certainly took into account curves a lot more than the 20s did. Thank God.
Yeah, you can find bias cuts starting in the 30s, which is great, because then you can have hips.
Yeah,
Prior
late.
to that, not so much.
Yeah, like late 20s, very early 30s. They did a lot of those bias cut silk evening gowns that were just freaking gorgeous.
Mhm.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, just great fashion, great hats.
Oh, the hats.
The 30s had some great avant-garde fashion.
Yeah.
They really, really did. I've been looking into like different patterns and such for them. What? My dog is now
so
looking at me
there's a
going, "What are
lot
you
that's
doing?"
worthwhile seeing in this movie, but there's also, like I said, just it was cut to shit, and it ruined it, honestly. Like, still worthwhile, but totally almost incoherent, or that's the way it's chopped up.
It could have been so much more than it was.
Yeah, you can see the bones of a really good movie
Mhm.
in there, and it just didn't manifest that way.
Nope.
Not in the 59 minutes.
No, not in that tiny little bit of time allotted for it. No, even the 74 minutes.
I
like I
can't
know.
imagine.
I mean, I know
No.
movies were shorter then, but even some of the shorter movies with that time had a tighter story running line than this one did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
this
like,
is-
half the time you're like, okay, I'm watching this, and all of a sudden we're at this, and what? How? Why are you connecting these two? And you never find out a lot of the stuff until later.
Yeah. And some of it you would have to like look up like the story and trivia to even have any clue about. But I mean, also I would say just watch it, just like I said, for what it is, and for the fact that, just to honor a woman who struggled, and this is her only screen appearance. So give her due.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But Hollywood, if you're listening, remake this, keep it in the 30s, get all the racist shit out of it. Don't do yellow face. And we want to see it.
Let a woman direct it.
Yeah, that would be good. Also, a woman screenwriter might help as well, because both the screenwriters were male for this as well. Yeah. Though, again, props, because you do have independent women like, Myrna Loy as Ursula Georgi. She was in charge. She was the mastermind. You don't really see that. I mean, you see femme fatales, but you don't really see this kind of mastermind genius behind, kind of thing going on. And it's very strong there.
Which I think can also fall into the way Hollywood would view those things. Oh, look at this person, see how it's driving them to a bad end.
Right. Well, and I mean, there's definitely a punishment tale in here where she's a character who's very strong. She's a character who's using her sexuality to get things.
And she's not white. Let's also add, because that's why she's the villain. She's not white.
Right. And she's not white. So,
Gotta punish her.
But she's very empathetic. Like you can completely empathize with this character and understand why she's
definitely
doing. And
like she was who I was rooting for.
yeah, I mean, there's a real, like you said, if we could get Hollywood to do it again now and really focus in on the bullying aspect of this, and that's one thing that they didn't even really address is what actually was said to her. Like, how
What did
bad
they
was it? I
do?
mean, you can imply that it was bad. Like, it had to be really bad. Like, what did
Well,
they
you can also
do?
apply that it altered her completely because the headmistress even makes a point of saying she was a sweet girl.
Yes.
So
She was a
yeah.
sweet girl and she only lasted a couple weeks. And you're like, wow, that's not like she didn't even finish the program. She was driven out. She was driven
And she
out.
was desperate to do it. I mean, this was her chance at passing and avoiding all this shit if she could do it. And she couldn't because they were so mean to her. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's
so
I think there's a wonderful story under there. I just don't think that the timing, the script, and the direction gave it what it needed to make it a thing. And that is not the fault of any of the women who were starring in it. That is the fault of the people who were doing that. They were acting their asses off. Myrna Loy was incandescent. And you just
Irene
can't.
Dunn as Laura Stanhope, wonderful.
Yeah, the acting from the women I thought was very tight.
Absolutely.
Very well done.
Even that, I know we were kind of making fun of her a little bit, but even the woman who died on the
on the train or the trapeze.
Helen who died on the train, her actual death scene was very like dramatic and very like she was really trying to fight it, and it was very interesting to watch.
Yeah, she was one character I felt really who I felt for. So
yeah very empathetic character. Sorry.
It's not a good movie, but it's an interesting movie, and you can see where good movies came after it.
I think that's a really good summation because while I enjoyed watching it, I was constantly also criticizing it. For the many things. So it was I was myself struggling to find like the category where it fit in. I was like, I think people should watch it based on this is now you can see where revenge sorority flicks come from. But there was just so much wrong that needed to be fixed. I mean, honestly, they would to make this good, you would have had to scrap the whole thing and start over.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, like so it's 59 minutes long. You don't feel like you're pissed that you lost an hour after you watched it. What you feel is you're pissed that they didn't do it right. Like you're pissed that they took this movie and fucked it up. But you're not pissed for having watched it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense because
absolutely.
It's like what you said. Like this could have been such a good movie, but it's chopped to shit. And that pisses me off because I'm like, well, I want to see a good movie. I don't know, if it needs another 30 minutes, throw on another 30 minutes. Rewrite the whole damn thing, frankly.
You want it to be just 8 women, it's 8 women. If you want it to be 5 women, it's 5 women. But please fucking hard. Don't call it 13 women and have 8 goddamn women showing up in it.
Yeah, who are these other mysterious women?
Piss me off.
Yeah, that's
I guess on that note,
I just can't.
We could end it abruptly. Yeah. We could end it as abruptly as the movie does.
I'm going to leap from the back of a train. Just leap. I wasn't even in immediate danger. I'm just literally enjoying leaping from trains.
We all got to die sometime, right?
There you go.
Meanwhile, should we get our horoscopes?
I was gonna say.
I think I'll skip the horoscope. Thanks.
Tarot card readings? Anyone? Actually, that's how I would update it. I wouldn't do horoscopes. I'd have them do like a round robin tarot reading. And
That would be
Nothing against
interesting.
horoscopes, but it would make more sense because,
I think it would resonate more for today's market.
Yeah. Yeah, have it be like a tarot reading.
Mhm.
And even you could have like the character that is the one seeking revenge be the person who's sending out the, like, she does tarot readings now and nobody recognizes her because she's been, put through the ringer like that. So,
Mhm.
and then she does all these readings and then all these readings start coming true. That's a really interesting premise.
And how each of the deaths is somehow related to that final card, that
Oh,
comes
yeah.
up.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah. It's the 10 of Swords and they're stabbed in the back 10 times.
The Fool, they're
The
found
Tower.
hanging.
The tower, a wall falls on them. Yeah, I'm into this. The Chariot, they get hit by a car. I'm totally into this now. Okay, we're
Oh,
writing a
yeah.
screenplay. Guys, watch out. 13 women.
I know actors and I know people who would film it.
All right. So now we got a side passion project we'll be working on
Oh,
one day.
Jesus, not another one.
Zero idea. We'll know you did it.
Copywriting. I'm copywriting it right now. Trademark DM.
Jam. All right. On that note, this has been Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, and we have loved talking about this movie. And I think you should watch it, and then you can come and tell us how, one, you hate us for making you watch it, and or two, how you completely agree that they should have done it right. And maybe you could send us money to make the movie right. Anything else, ladies?
Nope, just everybody, thanks for listening if you're listening.
Yeah. If you're watching, thank you.
And goodbye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls podcast, on Twitter at Girls, Ghosts Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.